Hi, thank you very much for joining me today with my amazing guest, David Horne, who is a gentleman I've known for many years. And today we're going to be talking about how you build a business up and look for exit. And it's a really exciting conversation. The market is still absolutely ripe for it. But perhaps if that's something you're thinking about, these steps that you need to take, and as we talk about this, will help you actually have a much more successful exit. So before I introduce you to David, I just want to quickly recap on what the BIP Chat is. So BIP stands for Business is Personal. And I believe business is personal. Unlike an investor once that said to me that when they brought, no, it was somebody they brought it into a boardroom with them. And they had given them some shares to be their co-director on the board. And this person said to me, Penny, I don't need to like you. It's just business. It's not personal. And my skin crawled at that point. And I knew I was in for hell. And so I very much believe that the philosophy is business is personal. How we treat others, how we treat ourselves, how we design the life and business we want. It's all very personal. And through these chats, I really want to have an impact with my guest on our listeners to help them have really successful lives and businesses. So brought David on here because I've known David for a long time. He is the author. I'm going to hold up two copies of Add Then Multiply, and David's got one there as well. So if you're listening rather than watching, the book Add Then Multiply, a really good book. Obviously you can get it on Amazon. David actually won the category of business self-development in the Business Book Awards, and that is a hugely competitive section and a very big awards. I've been to that ceremony a few times. This Add Then Multiply is about how small businesses can think big businesses and achieve exponential growth. And something that I always say this to people, because our community that we have, BIP 100, is made up of experts. Anybody listening to this, so you'll probably realize you are an expert, but it doesn't mean to say you're an expert in business. And I think we get very confused by that. And so people like David will really help you to not only optimize your expertise, but also make sure that your business is optimizing you too. So, David, I'm really excited that you've joined us. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Penny.
I'm going to start by asking you a little bit about your journey and how this sort of one of the enjoyable points in your life was when you got to this point of creating this book. So, and the motivation behind it. So, just give us everybody a little idea of your journey.
So I'm originally from Vancouver in Canada, hence the funny accent. I trained as a chartered accountant with PwC, qualified with them a long time ago, 1987. When I qualified, I ended up transferring to PwC's office in Zurich, Switzerland. Worked for them for 2 years and then joined a client, stayed in Switzerland for 6 years, moved to London in 1993 with that same company. Stayed in big corporates for probably about 10 years until the end of the 90s. And then I actually left my last big corporate role, which was with the BBC, at the end of 1999, thinking, oh, great, I'm going to get a job with a .com. And thankfully I didn't, because that whole thing was about to collapse. But I ended up getting a job as the European CFO of a very acquisitive PR agency group. And over the next 2 years, bought 7 PR agencies. And then we got taken over and merged into a much, much bigger company. And I left, and then I got introduced to a chap who was had just launched a cash shell on AIM, and I joined forces with him and became a co-founder of an AIM-listed business. And we purchased 7 companies and took over another listed company in a period of 3.5 years. And then I got headhunted to another AIM-listed company, and we did a very large acquisition. We took over our largest global competitor. And so I kind of just, over this 10-year period, I just became so exposed to fundraising and M&A and, buying companies, selling companies, and all of that. But at the end of the 10 years, I decided I'd had enough of working for other people, and I wanted to work for myself. So I launched my own business, and that was a fascinating experience. It probably took me 5 or 6 years to really figure out what it was that I did and was good at and people wanted to pay for. And it's just kind of grown from there. And once I had that clarity, I'd seen a lot of people writing books, and I'd talked to a lot of friends who had, or a few friends who had written books, and they just explained how transformational it was for their business. And so I sat down. I'd had a falling out with a long-standing client at the end of 2018, and all of a sudden I found myself at the beginning of 2019 with a lot more time than I used to have. And I thought, I've been talking about writing a book for ages. Now's the time to sit down and do it. And Penny, what a change it's been. It gives you clarity, it gives you structure, it gives you strategy. I mean, I had a number of clients where what I was doing was fine from when I was doing it in 2010, but it wasn't fine in 2019. I had grown beyond them, and I didn't really know what to do and how to, I didn't want to fire them because they weren't bad people or anything, but it's just the work they needed wasn't what I was doing. And having the book allowed me to say to them, look, this is what I do. This is what I don't do. Let me find you someone who can do what you need, and we'll part company.
Yeah, it's
So that
brilliant.
freed up time. And then also knowing, people talk about niching down and getting scared about niching down. Niching down is the best thing I've ever done.
Yeah, yeah, I really get
And
that.
the book really, really helped that.
Yeah, it's a really good advert for writing a book as an expert, actually. I really agree with you on that. And yeah, and so when you're writing it, when you sat down to write it, who are you imagining would read it? What would their life be like? What would they be needing? Who were you imagining?
Yeah, so the book was always targeted at entrepreneurs, and really from anywhere in the world. And I'm delighted to say that I've had, based on my Amazon reports and based on reviews and things, I can see that I've got readers in countries around the world. But it was really for anyone who was running a business, who was kind of at the point where they were either thinking, how can I see a shift or a step change in my growth, or they were thinking, boy, organic growth's getting really hard. There must be a better way.
Right, that's good. I really like that. And there's methodology in here that's
Yes.
really, really powerful. And so you call it the FACE, the fund, acquire, consolidate, and exit,
Yeah.
which is fantastic. Each stage, because before we went live with this, I was saying, somebody said they wanted to exit. You said, well, people contact me and say, it's July and I want to exit at Christmas. And you say, well, you should have started in 2021 thinking about that. I'd really like to explore that, because literally just before you and I went live, I was having a call with somebody who was applying to join BIP. And they are just in such an overwhelmed stage. I actually said to them, you haven't got time for BIP. We've got to help your head a little bit here.
Yeah.
And they're in that stage. They're doing £500,000 at the moment. They're wanting to exit in a year for many, many reasons: capability, capacity, all sorts of reasons, and opportunities in the market for them. So I'd love to explore this, actually. And is it best to explore it by going through each of those four areas?
There's a logical
Yeah.
flow to it. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah.
But
So first of all, for somebody to contact you, who's at the perfect place to contact you, and who would be not at the right place?
who's at the perfect place? Someone who runs their own business. They're turning over at least £2 million. They've got a team of people, and they're looking to grow faster than they've thought was possible. And maybe they're looking towards building towards an exit in the next 3 to 5 years time, but they want their business to be worth more than it's worth today. And they're open-minded. They're comfortable with the idea that there might be other shareholders in the business, i.e. investors. So if it's someone who only ever wants to have 100% control of what they're doing, probably less relevant. I
Right.
do some work with people who are 100% control of the business. Yeah, really. So looking for entrepreneurs who are looking at, how can I scale up? And to give you an indication of scaling up, there's a case study in the book of this company that I co-founded, where in our first year we turned over £1 million. We tripled revenue in the second year. We tripled revenue in the third year. We tripled revenue in the fourth year. And at the end of the 3-year period, we were on 27.7 million.
Oh, Goodness me, that's quite
So
phenomenal.
that kind of growth is possible.
Well,
It's not
wow, wow.
easy, but you know.
Yeah, God, that's very exciting for people. And doing it in a way that doesn't burn you out and overwhelm you and have you crashing as well. So fund is the first part of FACE.
Correct.
And so are you suggesting that people, you mentioned here about they've got to have this open-mindedness for getting investors.
Yeah.
Do you think for somebody to do an exit, most businesses will need to get some funding first?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I think, you know, some businesses can carry on and be, you know, just be internally funded and managed. And as long as the cash flow is sufficient that the owners can take out whatever they need and there's enough money to reinvest and grow the business, that's fine. But if they're looking at doing something that's going to drive a step change, then yes, funding is really critical to that process.
Right. And is that partly because you talk then about being able to acquire? Because obviously, if you acquire a company, you're scaling.
Exactly. If you're going to go out and buy a company,
Yeah.
and the two kind of go hand in hand. But if you're going to go out and buy a company, you're going to need cash. Now, there are a number of people out in the market who talk about go out and buy a company without any money of your own. And you know, yes, I know people who've done that and have done very well. I know people who've done that and it's been an absolute nightmare. That's not what I do. So one of my business heroes is Warren Buffett, and one of my favorite Warren Buffett quotes is, "It is far better to buy a wonderful company at a fair price than a fair company at a wonderful price."
Lovely. Yeah, I really
So
like
if you're a turnaround specialist, by all means, go and buy a basket case for £1 and turn it around, and hopefully you'll do really, really well. But if you're not a turnaround specialist, you're going to go in and you're going to have an awful lot of aggro, and you're going to have to fire a lot of people, and you're going to have to do some really, really heavy lifting.
Yeah.
Whereas if you find a good business, or indeed a wonderful business, and can buy it for a fair price, then put it together with your business and potentially with other business, and that's where the C of Consolidate comes in,
Right.
then the incremental growth in valuation can be substantial.
Yeah. So that's the Consolidate. So you've got fund, acquire, consolidate.
Yep.
And then the exit.
And then the exit.
And the exit point, really, obviously, you're working on that all the way through the fund, acquire, and consolidate, because you're already thinking about your operations and
yes.
And obviously, and I imagine lifting the founder out a little bit so that the business isn't founder dependent.
Very much so. And in fact, for an exit, that is absolutely crucial, because
Right.
it's very rare where a buyer will come along and say, actually, I want the founder to stay. There are sometimes cases. I know one, although it was a guy who sold a software company to a private equity house, and he pitched it to them as wanting to do a roll-up. So where he went out and bought a bunch of more companies with the private equity house's backing. It's quite a story, actually. This guy's written a book too. But he sold 77% of his company to a private equity house and stayed on with them for 4 years and executed a roll-up strategy. And they grew so big that 4 years later, when he sold the remaining 23% of the company that he held, it was worth 3 times what he sold the 77% for.
Wow, what an amazing story.
Yeah.
Wow. What sector was he in then?
Software.
Software. Yeah, that's tremendous. That's tremendous. So what strikes me is that I've written down 4 elements of what I observe in you, and obviously I've known you for a while now and listened to you and seen you, read your book and all this, is you have a really rare combination of talent. So you're obviously great with numbers. That you can eat numbers for breakfast.
Yep.
You're really comfortable with numbers.
Yeah.
You've definitely got a coaching mentality with people. I mean, and I think so that's the second. There's this experience, this wisdom you've got that gives empathy, because you've done it. So you're not just talking academically about the subject.
Right. Yep.
You know it. And then you also have amazing connections. And those 4 things, I think, are just quite a rare combination. And you're not aligned to a large company. No. Where you're just opening a door and passing it across to loads of people within a company. you're obviously, must get quite emotionally, I know not necessarily in a bad way, but must get very emotionally involved in these clients and
I do.
close to them.
I do. And in fact, one of the key things that we differentiate ourselves on is, you know, we're not like an accounting firm. We're not like a corporate finance boutique. We're not like a venture capital firm. We become part of your team.
Yeah.
You know, and fine. So you'll engage my company, and I'll bring people along, but our whole ethos is we are part of your team. And in fact, we just onboarded a new client about 6 weeks ago, and we spent the first 2 weeks having regular meetings where the first part of the meetings were all about the human connection. They were all about business is personal.
Yeah, that's really nice. That is good. You must see quite a lot of founders who aren't very good leaders. Is that something you witness?
What I witness is that some of them are really good leaders in certain areas of their business and appallingly bad leaders in other areas of their business. And what worries me the most is when they might recognize that, but they don't do anything about it. And again, one of the key things I talk about in the book is if you're going to scale up in the way that I'm talking about, you've got to bring in really good talent immediately below you as the founder, because you can't cover everything. And, you know, I mean, I have a section in the book where I say something to the effect that every business is unique, and yet at some level, every business is the same. They've all got to find and win customers. That's called sales and marketing. They've all got to deliver to their customers. That's called operations and logistics. They've all got to manage the money and compliance and governance and all that. That's finance and governance. They've all got HR, so they've got to look after people. And so, you know, if you're looking to grow, you've got to have professional people in those functions leading those. Now, it might be as you're growing that you fulfill some of those functional head roles, but when you get to a certain size, you can't do that. You can't do that. And one of the things I've really noticed is that most entrepreneurs I come across, the weakest of those areas for them is finance.
Oh, that's so interesting. Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
It really doesn't surprise me.
They're usually very good at sales and marketing.
Yeah.
They're often very good at the operations and the logistics and the delivery and getting it out there and the customer service. Some of them are good at HR, some of them are not. A few of them are good at finance, but most of them are not.
And does that mean they're not really investing in a team properly either into that?
Well, for those who recognize that they're not and want to grow, they have to invest in a team. If they don't invest in a team, it becomes kind of a, you know, imagine a three-legged stool and you take one of the legs out and it just falls over.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
and you know, I've seen businesses grow really quickly where the sales function was fabulous and off it went and blah, blah, blah. And 3 months down the line, they nearly bust because they haven't collected on any of the sales.
Oh, gosh. That's terrible, isn't it? Yeah, it's and also, I mean, I was trained to, you don't have a sale until the money's in the bank anyway.
Exactly.
You know,
exactly.
It's yeah, and people who just are not looking at how long their pay, can't think of the word for it, but how long it is before they're getting paid. You know, some people, they're just not chasing the money, and
then they forget that they've got to pay VAT and they've got to pay PAYE and they've got to pay corporation tax, and they look at the bank account and think, oh, hey, this is good, and then all of a sudden they get a VAT bill for 100 grand.
I agree with you about what you've observed there, and I think why are entrepreneurs not excited by seeing the money come in? It's really interesting.
Yeah. I don't know, and I guess because I'm so close to that side of it, it's hard for me to step back. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, part of it, I think, is, and this is sort of a wider societal thing, but we're not taught about money and finance in schools.
Yeah, I know.
And we should be.
Yeah, I mean, I always think Brits particularly find asking for money embarrassing. It's like
not just Brits.
Not just Brits.
No.
They don't want to look like they need it.
No. Yeah.
And it's a real cultural challenge. I think that it's
Yeah.
yeah. So when you do start working with a company, and you must have to do some form of audit around where are some of the challenges, and where is finance, you're saying, is one of the really weak areas.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah, yeah. In fact, one of the things that we do when we're meeting a potential new client is we'll say, look, we'll come in and we'll do a 1 day deep dive discounted price that, you know, just like 99 quid, but we'll come back to you with a report of what we found and then
Wow,
a
that's
proposal
amazing.
on how we can fix it.
Right, that is amazing. So that's like the kiss. That's like the
Yeah,
first kiss, isn't it?
exactly.
Yeah, and that's really powerful. I like the thought of that. I like sharing that with anybody that's listening to this, because I think that's a real gift, because that's obviously, you know, where your expertise starts, is the money in the
Correct.
numbers. And if you're going to exit a business, it's ultimately the numbers
Yep.
that are going to be really critical to that.
Yep.
So yeah, and the other thing that before we went live, I'm curious about is so many elections happening across the world, so many disruptive, so much fear being put into the heads of so many people. And I said, is there still buoyancy in the M&A world? And I mean, you just didn't hesitate. You just said it's absolutely there.
Yeah, I mean, the mega deals aren't happening to the level they are, to the level they used to. I have one client, but I mean, at SME level, they're still transacting. You know, especially as we were saying, you know, with the baby boomers getting closer and closer to 70 years. Most of them are in their 70s now. Not all of them yet. I'm at the tail end of the baby boomers, and I'm in my early 60s. So,
Yeah, me
but
too.
you know, there's a growing number of people who are looking to exit from companies. So from the perspective of someone who's looking to buy a good company, it's a great time. The mega deals are taking longer. One of my clients, a deal I'm working on right now, is in process of selling to a private equity backed business. But they've just had to renegotiate a substantial 9-figure sum of funding. And that took 9 months to complete. So we originally agreed the terms of the deal last autumn, and we're now finally back on track because it took them a lot longer to complete the deal. And of course, in the intervening period, interest rates shot up. So you know, when they were borrowing a 9-figure sum, and interest rates were a few percent. Well, okay. And now you're borrowing a 9-figure sum, and interest rates, base rates, are now like 5%. So then there's margin on top. So you know,
Yeah,
if you just imagine 5% on 100 million, that's 5 million. That's a
yeah,
lot of money.
yeah. So these acquisitions, this and most ways that people are exiting is they're exiting obviously to larger companies.
Usually to larger companies.
Yeah.
There are, again, there are people that I work with who are following my methodology now, and I'm working with them to build up a pool of companies. So you know, it might be that you're a specialist in a particular industry, and let's just say HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning,
Right.
and you've got a company in London, and then you decide to buy a company in Leeds, and then you decide to buy a company in Glasgow, and then you decide to buy a company in Manchester, and all of a sudden you can offer your clients UK-wide distribution, service, etc., just
Right.
from 4 little companies that previously had, you know, just their own local markets. But all of a sudden, by strategically growing into those locations, you can now go to national accounts, and you can say, hey, I
Right.
can service you in anywhere, you know, and I've got an SLA where I've got to be there within, I don't know, 3 hours or whatever it is. And you can deliver against that.
Right. So that's the mergers.
That's the mergers and acquisitions side of things. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And so is that the most buoyancy at the moment in the market, things like
Um,
that?
I mean, yeah, like I said, the market conditions are tough. Funding is very hard and is more expensive than it used to be. But there are deals out there. There are transactions happening. And like I said to you, I mean, I'm currently working on 2 deals.
Yeah, that's really nice. That's really encouraging. So here we are. We recorded this for anybody that's wondering when we recorded it. We recorded it in July 24. So say somebody's listening here and thinks, I really feel in 3 years' time, I want to have built up my business to a point where I can exit, and I
Yeah.
need to start this journey with David.
Yeah.
Where would you hope they would be at this point?
I mean, like I said, my sweet spot is kind of companies, I mean, companies that are kind of between 2 and 20 million.
Right.
For someone who's looking to exit, it depends on what you want to exit for, but the bigger you are, the more you're going to get typically.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But, typically on exit type deals, I'm looking for companies that are having, maybe at least 5 million in turnover. That
Right.
doesn't mean that smaller ones can't exit. It's just a question of kind of, focus. But the key things, if you're looking to exit, say in, by the end of 2027, is getting the business ready. And there are so many different avenues to go down and look through and prepare. But the most important ones of those are, number one, as I said, having a team of leaders underneath the founder so that when the founder is no longer there, the business doesn't fall over.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've seen examples of that work successfully. I've seen examples of that be appallingly bad. I remember when I was with the second of the listed companies, and we had bought, prior to my joining, they had bought a company in America that had been a family-owned business. And there were two brothers. I think they were the second or third generation of the family. But it was Bill and Dave. And Bill and Dave called all the shots, and everybody else in the company, and there were probably 40 employees. Everybody else in the company just said, yes, Bill, yes, Dave. And when Bill and Dave weren't there, nothing happened.
Yeah.
So you can't have that.
No. 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 No.
Because,
I completely
just
get
for a
it.
moment, put yourself in the shoes of the person who's buying the company. They
Mm.
want to know that that company is going to be well run.
Mm.
They want to know that that company is going to be growing. So again, if whatever you can do to show a nice 3-year growth story towards your exit will play hugely towards your valuation. Make sure your cash flow is good. Make sure your profitability is good. If you've historically been taking money out of the company or putting personal expenses through the company, time to tone that down just a little bit. Again, just show that steady growth.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen examples. I saw one marketing company. This was probably about 15 years ago. No, not that long ago. It was probably 10 years ago. And they'd had an absolute fantastic year one year. And they went out and bought a sailboat and put it through the company. Fine. I mean, if they got away with it with HMRC, great, happy days. But, those are the kinds of things that a buyer doesn't want to be looking at.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And then other things, get all your contracts in place. Make sure you've got contracts with all your clients. Make sure you got contracts with all your employees. Make sure you got contracts with your key suppliers. All those kinds of things. Because if you're going to sell a business and you strike a deal, what happens is you get to a point where you sign a document called heads of terms or heads of
Yeah.
agreement. And that sets out in principle, this is what the transaction looks like. And this is the price we're going to pay. And that will then typically include a period of exclusivity. And once you have that exclusivity, then you go in with your advisors, your lawyers and your accountants and other advisors, and you do a process called due diligence, where literally you go into the other company and you crawl all over everything. And, they'll depending on the size of the business, but they'll hire in accountants, they'll hire in lawyers. And that's what these people do as their job all the time. They know what to look for. They know where to look for it. They know the kinds of difficult questions to ask. So you got to be ready for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And if
So
you can get through that cleanly, it's great. And if that becomes a mess, that gives the potential buyer the opportunity to say, actually, no thanks, don't want to do this. Or, well, actually, we said we were going to buy the company for 5 million, but based on what we found, it's really only worth 3. So do you want to go ahead or not?
yeah. Yeah. And you kind of do a dummy run of that then before somebody tries to
Oh,
do
we
it?
go through due diligence prep all the time.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. I've loved this, David. It's really exciting. I think so much for people to learn. So can I just remind everyone? So Add Then Multiply is the book you can get on Amazon.
Yep.
How small businesses can think like big businesses and achieve exponential growth.
Yep.
And we've talked about FACE,
It's Add Then Multiply is also the name of my company.
There's it.
And so the website is add-then-multiply.com.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. And if you're looking to connect with David, obviously Thomas or I will give you an introduction, but also on LinkedIn, he's David B Horne, Horne. So contact David. You heard the offer there. You know, if you're a company that's around about 2 to 5 million, you're looking to grow and exit a business, start soon on that. And David has said, you know, he can come in and as I called it, the first kiss, just come in and have a look at your business and talk that through with you. I've absolutely loved this conversation with you, David. Thank you so much for sharing.
My pleasure, Penny.
And everyone, I hope that gave you lots of value, and perhaps you'll get in touch with David.
Terrific.